blew up everything that had worked for us leading up to that point. Everybody lost their job one night in my exec team. We were going to have to reset. By revolution, which is warfare, there's bloodshed.
Meet Jason T. Smith, the revolutionary entrepreneur who blew up his entire company to achieve true success. Discover how he redefined leadership and transformed his business through conviction and courage. Trailblazer in healthcare and founder of the Back in Motion Health Group, Jason's journey from a garage startup to a national brand exemplifies the power of conviction and innovative leadership.
What are my convictions? What I'm really asking is what I think true entrepreneurship is, or at least my experience of it. There are three things that clearly stand out. Well, how did we then get to 100 million? Well, 100 million was just...
So Jason, welcome to the show. My
Thank
first
you.
guest.
No pressure, hey?
Yeah, well, before we get on to the actual interview, I thought I'm going to do my interview very different. I'm going to do a show and tell segment. And so what have you got there to show to our audience and tell me more about it?
This is a very small representation of the real thing. So I have a Harley-Davidson 2014 limited edition night rod parked in the garage at home. And this is the key ring that attaches to the fob that disarms the security system for me to get out and ride the thing. So... it's a passion. It's good fun. I don't have a tattoo anywhere on my body. I don't have any piercings. I haven't been in prison, but I love riding a Harley-Davidson. So I'm not quite a one percenter, but it's still a great way to spend the weekend.
And why Harley and not like those other motorcycles?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've ridden lots of bikes over the years, but there is something peculiar about the Harley. It does capture your imagination in ways other bikes don't. And the real claim to fame of the Harley is that there is no one bike the same. So every bike is unique. So I've ridden Hondas and I've ridden Yamahas, but yeah, I enjoy the Harley.
And what is it about the Harley that you resonate with? Like, what is it in terms of the brand, or what does it tell you? That obviously sometimes you like something because it kind of speaks to you. Is there anything that we can learn about you through this Harley?
I think the bike generally is a great metaphor for life. I mean, you can talk and read and live vicariously through everybody else's experiences, but there is nothing like getting into the game and into the action and feeling and experiencing the thrill of the ride yourself. And so when I think about the Harley, it's freedom. You know, you get on the bike. I'm on my own generally.
Yep.
It's helmet time. The phone doesn't ring. There is something very special, very pristine about that experience. I love the noise. I love the bugs in the teeth. You know, like there's a lot of fun to have on a Harley. Yeah.
You sound like an adventurous guy.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
All right, so you mention a lot about the word conviction. So on your website, conviction, video conviction, next page conviction.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn more about what does it mean in terms of that word conviction.
I think we use lots of words in the pop culture to try and describe our purpose or our beliefs, our values, and I feel like they are all apt, they're all appropriate words. But for me, conviction just goes at least one step further. Conviction is this idea. It's not just a noble cause. It's not just a good idea. It's not just a possibility. A conviction is a compulsion. A conviction is something. It's not just something you could do. It's something you must do. It's almost like you're born for it. It's a truth you can't deny. And so when I think about, even in just everyday conversation, what are your convictions? What are my convictions? What I'm really asking is, what are those things you cannot deny? They are that's part of who you are. It's part of what you're meant to do. And even when you don't like it, you are propelled. You are compelled. You must do it. You can't ignore it. These are the convictions. So I think they go even a layer deeper than values.
So what is your conviction?
Well, I don't have a conviction. I mean, there are many convictions, I think, that make up the composition of who we are. But one of my convictions would be I'm not here by accident. I am here on purpose. I have been made in the image of God, that my life is not my own, that I need to live with a determination to fulfill all of God's intentions in my life. Like there's a whole bag of convictions that kind of converge into a powerful reason to do what I do.
Well, let's take us back to your childhood. I know the story of when you watch the TV and you saw this ad which led you into the journey of building a business and growing it to $100 million. Tell me more about your childhood. What was it like?
Yeah, I think I had a fairly predictable middle-class white Australian upbringing. Like I had great parents who loved me. I have an older sister. I went to a suburban school. I played weekend sport. Like it was fairly predictable. There was nothing out of the ordinary, but I count myself lucky. Like I count myself blessed to have had a relatively uneventful childhood in that sense. But you referenced this story at the age of 10. I had my first of probably only a handful of defining moments in my life. But at 10, like when I'm meant to be just worried about Nintendos and skateboards, I'm watching the cartoons and I see a World Vision ad, which in the 1980s, this was actually innovative.
I remember it.
Yeah, this
Even
was
though I was born in the
groundbreaking.
80s, I still remember World Vision was around a lot. Yeah.
Like this wasn't a genre that had been overdone. In fact, they were breaking new ground as they were starting to confront people through television commercials for $1 a day, for the for a cup of coffee a day, you can save a life. Celebrities were going full face to camera. They were showing these images of young Ethiopian children with distended bellies and frail limbs, and malnourished cows are wandering around in the backyard, and these little kids can barely stand, and they just end up collapsing in a cloud of dust and dirt. And I'm 10 and I'm looking at all of these images and it's wrecking me in ways I don't even, or at least then, did not have words to describe. And the questions I find myself asking at that time is, well, where are their parents? Where are the doctors and the nurses? Why can't they go into a supermarket and get food? Like, how hard can this be? Of course, naive, completely oblivious to the complexities of the developing world. But in that boyish childhood heart, I have a connection with God. And I feel like this matters more to him than it will ever matter to me. And without religion, without organised thought around it, I just remember making a promise to God, a God I barely knew, a God I presumed existed. I just remember making a promise and saying, I will play my part to try and help that. And I felt like the obvious pledge was I should become a nurse or a doctor and I should go work as a medical missionary. And that began the beginnings of my life trajectory at 10 years of age.
So did you grow up in a Christian family and you know about God? You grew up with God?
Yeah, my first personal experience with God was at the age of 10. My parents possibly had some nominal faith in their childhoods. I describe, for the most part, from about the age of 10 onwards, I grew up with a faith dimension in our home. But prior to 10 years of age, I wouldn't think it was of much to speak of. So for my living memory, for the most part of my living memory, I would say yes. Yeah.
And when did God tell you that you should be an entrepreneur? And when did your kind of entrepreneurship dream start to, come to like that, that conviction that you needed to be an entrepreneur?
So I would say I barely know what an entrepreneur is. I don't even know how to spell it. It's such a enigma of an idea, really. I think we use that label when we have no better description. So there was no clear moment in my story where the light bulb went on and I thought, I should become an entrepreneur, or that I am even one of those. So when I get introduced as one, I kind of smile on the inside because it's probably not how I would ever ordinarily describe myself.
What would you describe yourself as?
A frustrated missionary, an accidental businessman, a very reluctant franchisor. They would be the words that honestly come to mind. I'm a very likely success, frankly.
And what is it about entrepreneurship that you feel like the word just didn't match it? Like, what does it mean to you?
I think the stigma of an entrepreneur is one that paints this idea that you are an innovative disruptor. You are this creative genius. You can look around corners, see into the future. You can solve problems that nobody has ever contemplated a solution for. You are a superpower of proportions that makes the common man feel inferior. Like entrepreneurs in the commercial marketplace setting carry this aura, right?
Yeah.
They create something out of nothing. And so I don't think really much, if any, of that applies to me.
Yeah.
But because I've started many businesses, those businesses have scaled. The scaling of those businesses has reaped commercial rewards. People assume that this was all my original intention and they credit me where none is due.
Yeah.
So to go back to that question, when did I think I became an entrepreneur? Well, the answer is actually I've been dragged along kicking and screaming in my own story, feeling a tension to be working in medical and health fields, helping the poorest of the poor. And it's only that I've come to some resolution that a business is an incredible vehicle to fund that I gave myself wholly to the commercial space. So it's the means to an end.
Yeah.
I've been opportunistic, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think because there was some noble intent around that, and I think actually, to be just completely candid, I think it was God's plan for my life. He has enabled that to succeed.
Yeah.
Despite who he's got to work with, which is slim pickings, right? So, yeah.
You raise a really good point, because if we don't define entrepreneurship in an easier way to understand, because we're going to rob away that dream for a lot of people. Like when I first started, I also thought, I want to start my own business. What kind of unique idea can I come up with? And it was hard, frustrating. But then the business that actually made me money was actually accidental, when I was just solving a problem that I knew and I didn't think people would pay for it, which was like some marketing work. And then it became a business and you're solving a problem. So it should be simple. And if we explain that, then more people would be able to actually achieve that dream of having their own business than trying to be so creative.
Yeah. I mean, if you want the reflections of 25 years of struggling with this entrepreneur hangover, right? I would say there are three attributes now. As I look back and retrospectively, build what I think true entrepreneurship is, or at least my experience of it, there are three things that clearly stand out. I would say number one, convictions. So you've already asked me about that, but I think a vision of the future is all well and good, but it's no substitute for a conviction. So you want to go the long distance, you want to break through every barrier that's in front of you, you need more than an idea. You need a compulsion. So I would say that's the first. The second thing would be the creativity. And I don't think creativity is necessarily unique genius. I think creativity is giving yourself permission to think differently, to try things, to fail, to fall forwards. And in the process, like, our famous light bulb inventor, you just find 999 ways not to build a light bulb, right? So I think creativity, you can't sidestep that. And then the third one, the very inconvenient truth, is you need courage. So actually, we think entrepreneurs are brilliant. No, I just think they're prepared to go again, even when it hurts. Even when people say they can't, even when it's scary. So it's conviction, it's creativity, and it's courage. And I think if you've got those three, call yourself whatever you like, but you will achieve things that we will recognise as an entrepreneurial endeavour.
Yeah.
That would be my view.
I love that. And it's comforting, because it means that you don't have to know, because sometimes you think you have to know the technical skill. Like, I have to be a software developer to build this amazing app, It's really just about becoming that person. So going back to your entrepreneurship journey, what were some of the proudest moments in your business?
The paradox moments?
No,
did you say?
Proudest.
Oh,
Sorry.
proudest moments.
Bad
proudest
pronunciation.
moments. So all the wins in business always, for me, have been around people. If you asked my saddest, most disappointing regrets in business, they have all been around people. So it's an inescapable reality, I think. Almost whatever industry you're in, whatever business model you run, whatever culture you might be executing through, it's people, not location. So, some of the proudest moments are where I have seen us trip, fall, fail, and feel like giving up, and then just go that one more time and break through. So you just mentioned technology. I am a technophobe. I actually own a technology business, and of course these days you almost can't not be in technology no matter what business sector you play in. But I consider myself a reluctant participator in tech. I'm a slow adopter.
How old are you?
Yeah, exactly. The kids call me a boomer. So, but I can remember realising very early on that we would not scale, we would not automate, we would not be able to drive margins to a sustainable level if we did not implement quite sophisticated technology. And we're in a services industry, we're in healthcare, and yet tech was still an enabler, a driver for so many important deliverables in our business. But I knew nothing about tech. So I wasted literally hundreds of thousands of dollars and years I will never get back getting it wrong. And then eventually we achieve what we needed, and it is a breakthrough moment. And it, yes, it revolutionises the business, the client experience, the bottom line of the P&L. It does all the things you hope it would do, but the proud moment is all the people who contributed their feedback, their ideas, who didn't give up along the way, who said, yep, let's keep pursuing this, when we are trailblazing in a sector that hadn't developed this sort of tech before. So, yeah, they're proud moments, but not because of the tech. They're proud moments because of the people. And so, there would be lots of stories like that.
So I love this book, by the way, Outside In, Downside Leadership. I bought it. I wanted to read it, and then I'm highlighting the heck out of it because I need it at the moment. And I really love that you kind of summarized the goal at the time, which was 750, 100.
Yes.
So it was expanding your physio clinics to 7 states. Is it 50
million?
50 million.
Yep.
And 100 practices.
Correct.
Okay. So that was all covered there. But then at the end, you got to 100 million. So I want to understand where the gap was when you wrote the book and at the end when I saw that you've kind of achieved that. So
that book describes 2013 to 2015. So 3 years in a 23-year journey. I would say at least prior to COVID, and we can come back to COVID if we care, but that might be a real downer for this discussion. But at least... aside from COVID, they were the 3 most difficult years of my business life. Mostly because I pulled the pin on a grenade, threw it inside the executive team, ran for cover, but blew up everything that had worked for us leading up to that point. Like we had a traditional hierarchical model with a board, with a CEO as myself. I had an exec team, middle management. I had a whole cohort of franchisees with support staff, and then an army of physiotherapists that made up our group. And it worked. It worked. And we built a $25 million business. It took me 11 or 12 years to do that, but it worked. So why not just keep doing what I was doing? And I couldn't, because we started to plateau at that point, and people started to get, it sounds derogatory, I'll just say it, fat and lazy. But what I really mean is they got complacent. They just didn't take risks anymore. They weren't creative anymore. They didn't feel like we had to push the envelope and be brave. And so our business started to flatline. It didn't recede. Maybe inevitably it would. But to me, we weren't living our best contribution. And so I had to blow everything up, which instigated the book you're holding, which was the hardest 3 years of my life as I rebuilt the organisation that I destroyed. Right? So by that I mean everybody lost their job one night in my exec team, and I invited them to reapply the next day if they still wanted to work for me. And it was on new terms, with no titles, with no hierarchy. I had set a new mandate. It was to double the business in 3 years. It had taken us 12 to that point. But it was to do it completely differently. And so I had to relearn my leadership style. I had to relearn a management format. I had to innovate in places I hadn't experienced before, but I just knew we couldn't expect the radical impact I was chasing by doing what we had already done.
Yeah.
And so, we, after 3 years, more than doubled our business in that time frame. We probably went backwards before we went forwards. So we chewed a lot of sand in that 3 years. It wasn't fun. But then you ask, well, how did we then get to 100 million? Well, 100 million was just what the market decided we were worth 10 years later when we went to market and obviously got our valuations. So 50 million was the revenue or over-the-counter fees generated through the practices. We probably peaked at about 65 million. And then got paid a ridiculous valuation on that when the time came.
And you sold the business.
Sold, yeah. We backdoor listed. So we divested to an existing publicly listed health aggregator. And our franchisees got the opportunity to stay on the ride as local equity holders or roll their equity into the parent company or take their cash and run for the hills, or any number of variations on that theme in between. So 2021 was sale day, October, and we're in the thick of COVID, or we had at least started to emerge from the lowest troughs of COVID. We had grown 25% during the toughest couple of years of our economy in our working life, and the market saw us as a really opportunistic business.
Oh, love it.
Yeah.
I want to ask more about the whole exit thing, but I want to go back to that time when not only did you create this kind of aggressive goal, you were brave enough to also change everything. Like, what was the reason for this big shift? I mean, I read a little bit, it was, cultures sliding a little bit. I still can't understand how it needed this big kick in the bum.
Yeah. I mean, culture precedes performance, right? So, and I've just finished talking about the fact that it's always people. People for, people against. People are our wins, people are our losses. My greatest reward has come through people, and my greatest loss has come through people. My greatest achievements are people, and my greatest regrets are people, right? So relationship, it's inescapable. And the little sentiment that I felt almost branded on me early in my business venture is that people matter. People matter. So culture precedes performance. There were no doubts that me, along with my team, had started to take our people for granted as we were coming into those plateau years, and it's always hard to know cause and effect, but as we were coming into those plateau years, we weren't attending to culture like we once had. We weren't as careful. We weren't as precious with it. We weren't honouring the culture like we once had. And I actually took 3 months long service leave. And it's
during that time?
Just preceding this. Okay. So I had my great awakening actually in my absence. And my encouragement to many, and I've said this lots of times in lots of places, would be, as long as your business won't go broke without you, there is the most strategic thing you can do is have an extended absence outside of your business. And recharge, have time with the family, go live a different adventure, but also from a purely commercial perspective, get the objectivity of not being immersed in your business and being able to see it from arm's length and recognise your shortcomings as well as your opportunities. And so in that 3 month absence, I'm over in another continent.
I so agree with you. Every time I've travelled, I come back with complete new shift, new ideas. And I'm like, if I was just at home working hard, I would have been climbing the wrong ladder.
My team would worry when I go away, even if it's just for a couple of weeks, because they know they're coming back to a long laundry list of new ideas, right? But go away for 3 months and it will revolutionise your perspective. So I'm having these awakenings in my 3 months away of what we can do, what we should do, and then I return to the utter disappointment of absolute chaos in the team that I'd left behind, and in particular the two leaders who I had put in respective control over the different decisions of the business. So very quickly I realised to achieve this outrageous expectation of 750-100, we were going to have to reset. And you can either do that slowly, by evolution, small incremental changes over time, or you can do it suddenly by revolution, which is warfare. There's bloodshed. There's nothing gentle. And I've tried both. I think both are right at different times. On this occasion, I felt I needed to go the revolution pathway. And within a couple of months, half of my executive team had been released to a new adventure, and we were rebuilding, but with new talent, with new heart and soul, and with a very fresh mandate with no baggage from the prior year. It's very hard for all people to grow at the same pace of the organisation. Some can and some can't. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means it's the signal to reset.
Yeah. And where did you get the belief that if it's taken so many years to get to 25 and yet you are asking God to support this new goal of in 3 years I want to double this? Where did that conviction come from?
I'm not sure I have a really satisfying answer for that because it's not like...
But you believe it would happen.
It's not like an angel turned up at the end of my bed and handed me a manuscript and said, this is your next assignment. But I had a strong prompting. It was almost like a nagging thought. It was like God planted the seed in my mind to think bigger, to think beyond what we were, to believe for some impossibilities. And as I marinated in those, what I think are God promptings, as I kind of, just entertained all those possibilities, I felt a peace. I felt a resolution to land on the outrageous, unreasonable expectation of doubling in 3 years. And here's the deal, right? It's a goal I set based on arbitrary objectives. I'm not held accountable to anyone other than those to whom I invite. And if I fall a little short, who cares? Like, better to just bite off more than you can chew and chew like crazy, right? So it's the old adage of, aim to hit the moon, but if you clear the fence, you'll still be happy. If you aim to clear the fence, you might just go straight into it. And so I thought it was outrageous, and I said it to everybody. It's not like I believed with certainty that we would definitely achieve it, but by golly, we were going to learn some stuff getting there. And as it turns out, we exceeded our expectations. And here's the lesson. I reckon we set wildly conservative long-term goals, but really ambitious short-term goals. And it taught me that over a 3-year period, you can achieve a whole lot more than you allow yourself to believe.
Yeah.
So, that's my takeaway from it.
That sounds to me like quantum leap. When... it's just such a short time that you can actually achieve something. And that happened to me over 10 years ago when I met my husband. I was single, broke, and I started to, I surrendered to God. Actually, that was my first encounter with God when I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And then something happened where I was exposed to, Jim Carrey, the way he manifested everything. He stuck a check on his wall and said, I'm going to get that amount, in a year's time. And then he attracted it. In 12 months, I found my husband. I moved states. I achieved everything that was on my vision board, and that was my first experience with Quantum Leap. Now, for many years, I've forgotten all about that. And just recently, I reminded myself again that I started to play God. I started to just think to myself, how am I supposed to get that goal? So just think reasonably. But then I'm like, God is more powerful. I just have to put, one of those ambitious goals there and let him make it happen. And I think when I saw that in your book, I really resonated. I'm like, oh my God, I'm trying to do that for my business as well, doubling it. And I've seen that happen to you. So, would you call that quantum leap? Have you experienced anything else?
So I've not heard that term in this context before. So if there's if there's a book on that or whatever, I haven't read it. So I wouldn't use that term, but I can understand its appropriateness. I definitely wouldn't describe it as a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. I wouldn't describe it as positive thinking. I wouldn't describe it as being, my vision board that I manifested an outcome around. I would say that I felt a conviction, maybe not a conviction I can completely explain to you and our listeners, let alone my wife and closest friends, right? But it's an undeniable compulsion. I felt that I was to enter a season where God wanted to stretch me. I put some objective metrics around it because to lead people to a place they've never been before, you need to help create the future before it exists. And I was completely okay with the idea that I would die on the hill trying. And if I never reached 750, 100, or instead of getting there in 3 years, I got there in 4.5, or it took me the rest of my life, it was still an adventure, a journey, a pilgrimage that I was compelled to go on. And here's why, because I don't think it was ever about achieving 750, 100. I actually think it was about God wanting to do something in me. So the character I develop, the experiences I have, the learnings that I take away from it are the real prize. And the commercial metrics that hang off the back that people want to read about and maybe are the more memorable elements because it resonates in other business contexts are the least significant things. I'm more grateful for what he showed me and taught me and who I became through those 3 years than what I achieved. So it's a quantum leap in the sense that God wanted to step change me. That's how I would see it.
Yeah.
And he just used the vehicle of my business. Actually, I don't really think God cares about my business as much as I do. I think he cares a lot more about me than I do.
Yeah.
And so he will use the tools he has at his disposal. And so that's kind of how I rationalise that experience.
And the journey to achieving that, were there moments when you were, like, I think you just said that it went back a little bit. How did you make sure that the team are not unmotivated because they're not achieving it yet? The goal is so big and the progress is not there. Like,
it is a case study in trench warfare, in the sense that literally every day I would have to go in and I would have to continuously set expectations. I'd have to be gentle with their hearts. I'd have to be so intentional with my language. I'd have to keep pointing to the wins and not let the failures or the setbacks dissuade them. I had to keep bringing energy at times even when I lacked it and probably lacked it more than most. And so this is why I describe it as like a revolution, right? Like we are cold and wet in the jungle and we're low on forces and ammunition and the deck is stacked against us, and in all reasonableness we are not going to win this. And yet I've got to get up every morning and go back to work and pretend that this is achievable and help bring everybody on the journey. So the hardest 3 years of my leadership life ever, really. And so, but how do you do it? Well, you go back to your conviction and then you think, well, how can I be more creative? And then I've got to be courageous. So it's those three attributes still just getting tested all over again, but at a higher level with higher stakes. And you don't give yourself the option of retreat.
And how do you make sure that these goals don't sound like it's all about you and your money goals and wealth?
Yeah.
And how do you actually share that this is about the number of patients you're helping or the people you're feeding? Like, was there another conversation you have to have as well?
So important. Yeah. I think that is actually the heart of how, at least in our business, where I'm dealing with healthcare professionals who are altruistic, none of us are in this profession for the money. I mean, if we applied the same personal exertion in a different sector, we would at least double or triple our earnings because the margins in healthcare are very skinny. So they are called to their profession. And so to actually stand at the front of the lectern and cast this ambitious vision for more wealth, for more market share
and power,
for brand reputation and penetration, it's like it's water off a duck to them. They need to know they are living a significant life that is making a difference for others. And so it's not charades, it's actually genuine. We just have a different vocabulary. We have a different lexicon. And so instead of talking about profit or revenue or fees, we actually want to talk about how many lives we've impacted, how many people we've touched, how many injuries we've helped rehabilitate, how many kids we've got back to sport, how many adults we've got back to work. Like, it's a different language.
So were those the KPIs behind all that? Like that
Absolutely,
might be the strategy.
I mean, you're probably familiar. I'm sure many of your listeners would be familiar with the balanced scorecard concept, right? And so, there's lead and lag indicators and there's all these different quadrants of measurement, and financial metrics should be the last thing you look at as the outcome, not as the driver. And so what are all those learning and growth metrics, which are really about your internal people? What are all those systems and process measures that improve quality control, that push you to what are the customer, or in our case, the patient metrics that we're measuring, all of which are signals and indicators that we're making a difference in the lives of others. Oh, by the way, congratulations, you just exceeded budget by double fold. It's almost an afterthought. It's almost the tag at the end. Oh, wow, who would have thought? Well, we were focusing on people in pain and trying to give them a better life. You've just become the market leader in your business. That's incredible. Well done, guys. But, back to Mrs. Jones at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with a slip disc. And so I think it's genuine because that's actually what they really believe. You can't ignore the realities of business. Like, you need to be viable, you need to be sustainable, but success or impact or exceeding a patient's expectations in the consulting room, it's just the law of the jungle. It's going to be profitable, right?
Yeah.
Because they'll tell others, your business will grow, and with the scale comes economies that enable you to reinvest into your convictions. So I just think we were very careful about our vocabulary. We did not talk. If you came into our board meetings and you came into our management meetings, you would think we were weird because we would use our own made-up parlance to talk about what was important to us, which made sense to us but to no one else. And it kept our eyes on the real prize.
Love it. Now, the biggest thing that I've learned is this whole spheric-looking hierarchy that I've never thought of.
Yeah.
But one thing I took away from that is just you can design whatever that's going to make it work for your company. And I'm really curious and eager to actually apply this. Can you explain more about that one team model and what's the best? Yeah, what does it look like? What's the best way to apply it?
I'm so sorry for your readers, your listeners right now, because trying to verbally describe our model without a diagram will be torturous. But you can easily jump online and Google the image if they want to do that. You wouldn't have seen this before because, frankly, I've never seen it anywhere, and we literally made it up. Of course, none of us are so unique in that every thought we have is original, but it's a cut and paste. It's a mashup of lots of different organisational models that I liked bits and pieces of and tried to blend into our own unique experience. Yep. And the whole point of my book actually is not that you should do what we did. It's not that you should apply the one team spherical model exactly like we have. It worked for us, no doubt. But my advice isn't that you do exactly what we've done. My advice is build a model that helps you achieve your purposes and don't just take the model you're given because it's not a one size fits all, and you can exploit your opportunities if you accept that the structure of your business should be subservient to your mission. And so in our case, it is a planetary model, right? It's out of this world. And so we have a core, we have a mantle, we have a crust, we have some orbiting moons, and then we have this primary source of the sun. And, I know it's almost ridiculous hearing
No, I
myself,
love it.
hearing myself say it out loud, right? But it really resonated with our team, and we co-created it. It's not like I just sat in a dark room at 3 o'clock in the morning and then appeared the next day on a hill with 2 stone tablets and said, this is how it's going to be. But so we innovated it. We went through multiple iterations of this, but we've landed on this idea that our planet, our model, our business will not succeed without a primary source of the sun. It's our source of energy, it's our source of light, our source of heat. And so that's our purpose. And for me and for the team who I gathered around me, we had no doubt that we were serving a higher purpose than just profitability or even just being an excellent member of the profession. We actually wanted to serve the purposes of God in the developing world. Then we go to the core of our business, which is really our patient, the person who is unwell, sick, injured, whom we are there to serve. Then we have these functions of our business, which make up the guts of the planet, the mantle, the core substance. And the functions are the same traditional functions any business has: marketing, finance, operations, technology. And then we wrap it all around the crust, which is our board of governance, our leadership, our accountability processes. So rather than having our board at the top who would dictate terms down, we had our patient at the middle, and all eyes were focused inward on how we serve the patient better. And we tried to make the outer concentric circles of management and board governance increasingly redundant by empowering those closest to the patient, which are practitioners and receptionists, and giving them autonomy and authority. So that was kind of the spherical model. And it worked in lots of ways. Like as a picture, it worked because it cut through thousands of words and helped people visually just see, oh my gosh, so Jason isn't at the top of the tree anymore. Oh, that's good news. Get rid of him. And we don't have to ask permission from the board every time because we've been given delegated authorities. So what's the test of whether I'm making the right decision? Well, what's the impact on the patient? Because they're the core. They're right at the centre. And why are we doing this? That's right, because the sun. There's a higher purpose to all this. So visually it just worked. It really worked. And it, I think, just unlocks then a different mindset, a different paradigm, and then behaviour follows.
Now, as a student of this, wanting to apply it when I get back next week, what's the first step? Is it drawing this diagram first and understanding the functions? Where am I going to, like, what are the placeholders? Yeah. And then figuring out people's skill set and strength and plug them in, or what was your process?
I think by the end of me publishing that book, I was on version 7 of one team, right? I think I might even put that disclaimer at the back of the book saying, I'm writing to you the most current iteration, but by the time this goes to print, I'm sure I'll be on another version. So the model is going to keep evolving. I would say don't be preoccupied with the mechanics. The most important thing you start with is why you would even want to do it. Honestly.
Well, I love the fact that it's really not about the power, it's about empowerment with everybody. Yeah. I really love the result that you got out of that.
But you're about to disrupt your business. So from what I know about you, Lynn, you've got a great business. It's tidy. A simple business is an excellent business. You're successful. Why pull the pin on a grenade and blow everything up?
Don't do what you did.
No. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying start with why you would do it. Start with why you would do it. Don't do it because I did it. That would be the worst possible reason. And don't do it because it's just a trendy, interesting, fashionable idea. Gotcha. Do it because something about what you're currently experiencing is a frustration. There's a tension. There's a lack of fulfillment in some area. You're not achieving what you expect. There has to be a strong conviction for why. Because once you pull the pin, you can't undo the collateral damage, right? You are about to undo what you've spent 10 years building. And it's totally worth it if you get to the other side. But if you stop halfway, you'll end up with less than what you started with. So my encouragement, and I coach lots of CEOs around this stuff and work with whole executive teams, and I would spend hours, sometimes days, like consecutive sessions, still just ruminating with them on why. And once we have a compelling reason, it almost catapults them into the motivation and the fanaticism to pursue the courageous what. But you need the why. So that would be where I start. And then shortly after that, I'd be getting all my people in a room and I'd be having like the most honest conversations you have possibly ever had inside your business, giving people the safety to tell you exactly what they think. I call them whiffle sessions, what I feel like expressing. And that is not just cathartic, that's constructive. That's actually the beginnings, putting all the jigsaw puzzle pieces on the table. We don't even know what picture is on the front of the box yet. But we know now we've got all these pieces on the table. Now, what picture are we trying to build? What have we got to work with? Where's everybody at? And from there, you can start to compile your model. So that would be.
And your why, could it just my why, or should I be pulling in a few key people that I believe understand what's going on and go, do we have a why together?
It's a really difficult element of this whole experience. There is such a tension when I talk with people about, do I set the vision as the leader or do we co-create the vision? And I would say it this way. There is one set person in every adventure. And it's not because they're better. It's not because they're smarter, older, richer, more popular. It's just because the one person who initiated it, who carries that conviction, is the set person. And so I would say it is your job to cultivate clarity over the big picture, but the essence of what it is you're doing, because you will outlast everybody. There is a very good chance that when it really gets tough, you will be the last one standing. So you need to be the guardian of that conviction. But then very quickly after you have cemented that, then I invite the team who feel deeply, who think creatively, who believe also in what we're doing, to help pad it out, enrich it, to bring contribution that I could never have considered, but not to contradict my conviction. So the moment it challenges the conviction with an attempt to replace it with something else, then they're the set person. And so I know it's a very delicate topic, actually. It's very, very sensitive and it could be misunderstood. It's nuanced and I hope I haven't offended people. But I would say you need to have nurtured your conviction first, and then that's your gift to the team and the organisation, and then everybody else co-creates around it.
Love that. Okay, now going back into, you mentioned that you worked hard. It sounded like some gruesome years. What was home life like? Were you always someone that made sure that you placed God first and your wife and kids are prioritized, or were there times when it wasn't balanced?
It's at this point where my eyes roll back in my head, Lynn, and I think, you should have invited my wife onto this podcast, not me. So we've been married 26 years. She's an absolutely incredible person and has, together we have both. We have both really nurtured our conviction. Like this is something we share in common. But we have 4 children. Paulina worked in just about every job in the business at some point in the early years and then chose to really devote herself to raising our children at home. And my work took me out of the home for many hours a day and I travelled extensively. And so the one tension that we could honestly disclose that we have carried from day one to today is, how do we wrestle the balance between work and home, between the passion for what we think God's asked us to do, and our first love and our first commitment, which is marriage and parenting. And so I would totally be lying if I said that's been easy. That has been a constant tension. But here's something Paulina taught me about halfway into the journey, and that is, Jay, stop beguiling the tension. Like stop resisting the tension. You go to work and everybody's pulling on you, and if I wasn't also pulling on you from home, you would be thrown off balance and out of equilibrium. So tension is your friend. I think of it as a mast on a ship, right? All the rigging on a ship, all the ropes and rigging, once the wind fills those sails, all that stuff becomes taut. It is tight. There is tension, but it's in equal and opposite directions, and it keeps the mast upright, and it enables the sails to fill with wind, and it's what propels the ship. If you didn't have tension in all these different areas of your life, I would be the most extreme and unbalanced individual. So it's a constant tension to be home. So I would try not to travel any more than one night at a time. So even if I was doing a state-by-state tour, I would often fly back to Melbourne, zigzagging in and out.
So you made a conscious decision to design that.
Absolutely. You have to be intentional. None of this will happen by accident. You will be sucked into the vortex. Whoever screams the loudest will otherwise get your attention. So, Paulina and I would plan the whole year in advance. I would set all the travel schedule with my PA. There would be absolute block-out periods. School holidays were no-goes. It took me a long time to get this right, but eventually I realised that, there was a hard full stop at 6 p.m. or I wouldn't make dinner with the family, and I wouldn't make bedtime and story time and bath time, and I would never get those years back. So I had good mentors who, through their years of regret, helped me learn from their mistakes. Then I might work again from 8 p.m. till 1 a.m. or whatever, but at least I wasn't sacrificing those crucial hours. Then as the kids got older, weekends became more important, weekend sport and just being present with the teenagers to make sure when they had a question I was around to answer it. So, Paulina and I have just had to continuously reassess this. And I got it wrong more than I got it right. And Paulina was the great protector of the culture of the home, and I think we've fared really well, but not because I was great. I think we fared really well because Paulina kept up that equilibrium, that tension, and I had enough good sense to concede when she made it clear to me that I was unbalanced.
Yeah. What would you say to those entrepreneurs out there who are saying, just wait, when I get there, let me just get to my goal and then I'll have all the time in the world and be with you, or like...
Well, it's an illusion, right? It's a total mirage. And why wait? Why wait when you can have it now?
And we don't know if we're going to live tomorrow.
Well, we don't. But also, we have to be honest with ourselves, and we're still trying to demystify this concept called entrepreneurship. But if we are people of conviction and we are people of creativity and we are people of courage, I promise you the next goal won't be your last goal. The hill you climbing now is really
once
just
you get
a pit
there,
stop.
You go and set
it's
a
really
new
just
goal.
a pit stop for a higher peak. There's something in you. It's part of your DNA. It's something to be celebrated, by the way. It's something to love. I want to esteem and honour this in people, but it's a total lie to think that things will be materially different when you cross the next threshold. It won't. The worst thing about running a PB, a personal best time, is that you want to get another one because it feels so good. Problem is that takes harder work, more training, more sacrifice. So once you get to 750, 100, to go double that again, to get the same sense of achievement, to know that it's possible, requires even more tax on the family. So I actually think better to accept today that your opportunity is now, and don't be extreme, just weight shift in the direction, the opposite direction to which you're naturally pulled. So I'm naturally pulled to tasks. I'm very task orientated. So for me to intentionally just sit at the kitchen table for another hour after the meal's finished and be for whoever in our busy families coming and going, and to just be available on the off chance that someone might want to just have a casual or a profound conversation actually requires intentionality on my part, because it's so easy to otherwise just go and do something. But I've got to weight shift in that direction. I don't have to all of a sudden become someone I'm not. I just have to recognise just incrementally shift. Shift in the direction you don't naturally go, and don't wait till the goal is achieved. My wife tells an amazing story on this. So it's a metaphor, but it's a really good one. It's like every time I would travel, I would ask her as I'd leave the house, like this is a metaphor, but I'd ask her, can you just hold this rock? Now, she is more than capable to hold this rock. It's like 5 kilos. She's a strong, capable, independent woman. But this rock is, can you just keep the kids fed? Can you get them to school? Can you keep the house in order? Can you look after yourself? Because I'll be away for a few days, and when I come back, I'll take on the rock. And that sounds very reasonable to me. And she's very capable. The question is, how long can someone hold the rock before, it's not that the rock got bigger, it's that she fatigues. And it's a compounding effect. And after a while, you learn to hate the rock. And so you've just got to, I think, to those people who feel like, look, just hold the rock one more day. I'd say, you know what, go in, grab the rock. Just grab the rock. Just for a day, give them a rest. And if you habitually start to weight shift a little bit in that direction, it will have disproportionate rewards, would be my encouragement.
Yeah. Because you mentioned before that some mentors have given you advice because they've made some mistakes. What were they? So
I reckon every key mentor, and I feel really blessed, I've had some amazing people in my life and some who have journeyed with me for decades. I think all of them, I'm just trying to check that I'm not exaggerating here, but all of them have had a major burnout of some description, like I'm in a meltdown.
And they became very successful, and because of that, they were
all ultra successful in their own rights, and they've all recovered. And but they've learned such immeasurable wisdom from their own experiences of burnout and fatigue and overload. And so I can think of the 3 most important influences in this context. And they've all shared with me like the deepest, darkest and horrible moments of what it was like to fully burn out. And when they saw those signs in me, I'm just glad I was cognizant enough to hear them. And I've been dangerously close. But because I had their lived experience to kind of benchmark to, both Paulina and I could then be very sensitive and vigilant to the signs when they started to appear in my world. And so I was able to be rescued from the cliff edge. And so, smart people learn from their mistakes. I reckon really wise people learn from other people's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so great. So you sounded like you were quite intentionally, while you were working, when you got the chance to retire, sell up, how did you design your new life? What is your life like now?
So I'm sort of still in that bubble, that unusual artificial world, because I've spent 25 years working 8 days a week, running hard, full of clarity of what it is that my next objectives are. And now I'm in a space of relative rest, ease. It's like a sabbatical. I'm very grateful for it. My body's recharged. I think my spirit's refreshed a little bit. There's lots of good things that have come out of it. And I'm really spending most of my time at the moment serving other people's visions. So I've got a portfolio of different boards that I either chair or am a non-executive director on. I'm investing in a few initiatives. We run a micro family office and we run a charitable organisation. So there's no shortage of things to do. I'm writing, I'm speaking, I'm coaching and I'm mentoring. So heaps of stuff to do, but I feel like for the most part I'm serving other people's visions. But that's a beautiful space because I've spent 25 years running single-mindedly in one direction and I've just in this bubble where I feel like I'm being released to help and invest into other people. And I fully expect that might not be forever, but it is for now. And I'm really enjoying the change of pace.
Yeah. And are you reducing the amount of time you're working? It's not 8 days anymore?
Correct.
What is your boundary when it comes to work?
Look, I reckon I'm probably engaged in intentional, meaningful work, maybe 3.5 days a week. Which is a beautiful, it feels like, I'm barely doing anything compared to what I was used to, but this is just creating lots of bandwidth, lots of open green space for me to just think and be and enjoy the family and travel and experiment, play with stuff, do some writing, do things I wouldn't ordinarily do.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't think that'll be forever. But for as long as it lasts, I'm an absolute fool not to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so my wife would say, this is such a unique opportunity. It's a window. If you don't make the most of it, you've only got yourself to blame. So take it as a gift.
Yeah.
And so that's how I'm.
Yeah. There's no time definitions, just see how you feel.
Yeah.
So tell me about your upcoming book, Unlikely.
Unlikely.
Is that your kind of biography?
It is.
Sounded
It's
like?
the memoir of the Back in Motion experience. So it's sitting with the printers right now. Advanced copies should land within the next 30 days. The official release is scheduled for 1 October. So it'll come out in paperback through major bookstores and e-books. It is the completely honest story behind the story. So everybody sees the press releases and they see the brand and they look at 750, 100 and then they look at the ASX announcement of our sale price and they think, what a lucky guy, unbelievable success story. This entrepreneur tag gets thrown around and they invite me to speak at their conferences and then they fall off their chairs when I tell them it's all an accident. It was never meant to happen. It's been, like 3 trips to hell and back. And so this is the personal story, not the corporate story. This is the personal story behind the business. And I just pick up some of the elements of my childhood, but mostly quickly get into how we started the business and then all those experiences that shaped me and had profound influence on the direction of our business, but through the eyes of a person and not a CEO. It appeals to, I think it appeals to executives and entrepreneurs and marketplace leaders because there's so much mayhem, there's legal disputes, there's parliamentary inquiries, there's corporate espionage, there's all sorts of absolute craziness that goes on. So I think it appeals to the marketplace individual, but I think mostly I was writing it for just the everyday person who just thinks they're not living the life they expected, because I certainly thought I was living someone else's life. And so how I reconciled that year on year for 22 years before I got my exit is really the personal story.
I love that. Well, as we wrap things up, and the title of my new podcast is going to be called Faith to Freedom, what kind of last word of advice would you give to someone who's seeking that freedom and just needing that kind of last word of encouragement to take that leap of faith? What could you say to that person watching now?
Yeah, so faith is this whole idea of believing in something you can't see. And I would just say to people that you need to take some risks. You need to believe for things that might not be obvious, that your circumstances are not the best predictor of your future. In my case, and therefore the only experience I can offer, is that a faith in anything other than the God who created you is foolish, because it's like building your house on sand. And once the waves and the storms come, the house foundations move. But if you put your faith in something that is bedrock, and who better than the person who created you, God, then you have solid and stable ground on which to believe for some impossible things. So everyone will have a different worldview on all that, but that's my story, and it's the truth as I've experienced it, and I just encourage people to take some risks.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jason. That's a wrap. And if you would like to check out some of Jason's book, this is Get Yourself Back in Motion. This is Outside In, Downside Up, Leadership, and then the upcoming Unlikely. So thank you again, Jason, for your time today.
Appreciate it.